just landed at Frederick Douglass Greater Rochester International Airport, and I'm so excited to be back in my hometown region and ready to talk to a lot of people and see some of my old friends and neighbors and talk about the book. This is the baggage claim area where we did part of our wedding photo shoot for our official wedding photos. We thought it was really appropriate to do it at an airport. We were supposed to actually maybe get married here because they have a chapel, but that didn't work out for reasons that I explain in my book. Time to do some TV with FOX Rochester.
A New York City travel writer has traveled back home. Mark Chesnut is from Brockport, and he's back in the area to promote his memoir, Prepare for Departure, which is about a lot more than travel. Mark joining us live here on Good Day Rochester. Mark, good to have you here.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
It's good to have you here. So you are a travel writer, but this book here, I should grab it right here, Prepare for Departure, this is a little bit different for you, right?
Absolutely, yeah. This book is actually the story of a mother and son facing the last months of the mother's life as they revisit their lives together. And the book is about me and my mother, Eunice Chesnut, from Brockport. But it addresses a lot of universal issues because it's a coming of age story, it's a coming out story, it's an end of life story, and it's also pretty funny because life itself can be sad and funny.
Yeah. Hey, talk about kind of going from a travel writer to writing a book like this. What inspired this book and what made you want to, if you will, kind of take this departure into this lane?
Yeah, it really is a departure, yes. It started not even as a book, really. I didn't set out to write a book. I started just keeping kind of a journal, really, or almost a diary. As my mother started getting sicker, it was kind of therapeutic for me. Yeah. It was a way of coping with that. But then as I started writing about what we were going through together, I also started writing about our lives together, going back decades. And the funny stuff came out, and the weird stuff, and the challenging stuff. So eventually it kind of naturally, organically evolved into a book.
Yeah, you tackle some tough issues, obviously, grief, death. Talk about kind of working through those issues within this book. And you mentioned it was therapeutic for you as well, but I think it's issues that all of us grapple with.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's what's been interesting to hear from a lot of the people who've been reading the book is that they can relate to a lot of it because even though it's my mother's and my story, it does deal with things like aging and caring for aging parents, and also feeling like a misfit when I was a kid. I was kind of a misfit kid out in Brockport, but so it's also about finding your place in the world and the evolving nature of parent-child relationships. So it does address a lot of issues.
Yeah, we're looking at some pictures as well. So I imagine some pictures from your childhood and travel as well. This had to bring back a lot of fond memories for you too from your childhood. You talk about awkward years and coming of age, but some fond memories as well, revisiting all this stuff, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's really a nice way to relive the wonderful moments. So, at first, obviously, it's difficult to see your parents getting sick and getting up in years and not doing so well, but it also is a time for remembering the happy memories as well and reliving them. And so the book was a great way to do that, and also a great way to connect with people who have similar experiences, because I hear so many wonderful stories from other people too.
I was going to say, you write for a reason. What do you hope people take away from this book?
Well, what I'm hearing from readers is that when they read the book, they laugh and they cry, which I think is a wonderful thing because the book is funny and sad, just like life itself. And so I think people are seeing in the book part of themselves in a way. Different people relate to different aspects of the book, obviously, but it gives it reminds people of the humorous side of life and how humor really can also be a way of coping and dealing with the more serious moments.
Getting through those difficult moments.
Right.
You've got a few events left in town. I think you had one last night. You've got two more, though, right?
That's right, yeah. Last night I was in Canandaigua at the Wood Library, which is wonderful. And then tonight we'll be out in Brockport at the Morgan Manning House, which is a beautiful Victorian-era mansion where my mother was the historian for about 30 years, actually.
Oh, wow.
So we'll be there tonight from 6 to 8 p.m. It's open to the public, and we'll have a reception and a reading and Q&A and lots of conversation in Brockport. And And then on Saturday at 1 p.m., I'll be at Writers and Books, which is Ampersand Books on University Avenue, right here in Rochester. And that is at 1 p.m. on Saturday. That'll be reading and meet and greet and all that sort of stuff, too.
Yeah, if people can't make those, where can they find the book?
Basically, any of your favorite online retailers, and also at Ampersand Books in Rochester, they have it as well. But if you want to order online, it's available on Amazon and, just basically any online retailer.
Another way to support local, too, if
Absolutely.
they want to do that.
Yes.
Mark, great having you in. Welcome back. Good to have you in Rochester, and thanks for coming in this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. We're going to be back in a moment. Stay with us.
We're standing here in front of the Morgan Manning House, which is a beautiful Victorian-era mansion in my hometown of Brockport, New York. And my mother actually worked as a historian for this historical society for about 3 decades. And I'm very excited because we are doing my hometown book reception tonight right here inside.
Thank you for coming. I'm Mary Lynn Turner. We are so excited tonight that Mark Chesnut is here. I knew his mother for so many years, and I won't even tell you all of the adventures we had here in this house. At Friendly's, eating ice cream. She did like ice cream. She really did. She also liked chips and dips very much. And cola. Coke. She often had a Coke. I spent many, many hours with Eunice, even though Mark never heard about it. But that's okay, I don't mind. One little story, and I do remember many stories that Eunice told me, but one story was about when Mark was born on September 24th, and she was in the hospital. Next day was the 25th, the day after that, the 26th, and a friend stopped in to visit her. And that friend said to Eunice, "Do you remember that big house on Main Street, that big brick house? There was a fire there last night." So that house and Mark, this house and Mark, are actually tied together in history. And I told him I'm always going to know how old he is because I know when the fire was. So there's so much more to the introduction, but you can read the book and find most of it out. I am going to give you Mark Chesnut.
Thank you so much, Marilyn, and thank you so much to all of you for coming out. I know my mother would be thrilled to see so many people here, and I know that this room is not filled because of me or because of the book. I know it's filled because of Eunice Chesnut, so we do have to thank her. I'm just riding on her coattails. How many of you all have been to the Morgan Manning House before? I think most everybody, right? But there's a few of you maybe who might be the first time, and this is an amazing home, amazing landmark, as you know, and if it is your first time, you need to come back again and take a tour and consider joining the Western Monroe Historical Society because they do such good work, and I thank them so much for hosting this event tonight, and obviously this is an amazing place. I kind of grew up here a little bit since my mother was the historian here for about 30 years, so I feel like I'm coming home, and especially seeing all of you, so many of her friends, and so many of my high school and grade school friends, all the way back to family core at the Brockport Elementary School in the Central School System. So that's wonderful. I also want to thank the Liftbridge Bookshop for handling book sales here tonight, and we have sold out, which is wonderful, but it's not sold out forever, it's just sold out tonight. So thank you so much for your support of that and supporting the Liftbridge and local businesses. That's really, really a wonderful thing. So I also have to confess that I'm staying in Rochester in an Airbnb with my family this weekend, and I left my presentation there, so I'm just going to sing. Now, actually, I'm just going to try to channel a bit of my mother, Eunice Chesnut, because I know that she did not need a script either. She could just kind of fake her way through anything, and so I'm going to do it a little bit like that, although I've made some notes just to remind myself of some of the main points I wanted to make. So, as you know, I have this new book out called Prepare for Departure, and I've already made a few presentations, a few talks, a few signings, but since this is a much more personal setting, and I have a personal connection to Brockport and this house and to so many of you, I thought I'd make this a little bit more of a personal presentation. and share a couple of the reasons why I was afraid of people reading this book, and especially a lot of the people in this room. And then also I wanted to share a surprise that I found after the book was published. So first, I wanted to tell you why I was kind of afraid about this book. One of the reasons was because, being here in Brockport especially, a lot of you knew my mother, Eunice Chesnut, and a lot of you already knew me. And so I was afraid that some of you might think I was going to do like a mommy dearest job on my mother. So, like a tell-all celebrity memoir after the parent dies and we write about how horrible our parents were or something. So, and that was not my goal, obviously, for those of you who have already read the book. And if anything, my mother was less like Joan Crawford than I was like Damien from The Omen, I think, when I was growing up. So, if anything, any of her extreme reactions was only related and justifiably related to something that was related to my misbehavior. So if I put my foot in the cake that my mother had made for Eileen Swartout to take to out on Redmond Road, then I'd get yelled at. Or when I took a key and scratched a gigantic smiley face on her piano, on her cabinet grand piano, I got sworn at. And I think any of you would do the same with your kids, right? If that happened. So she gets credit for not yelling and swearing even more after I did that. So anyway, there are some things in there. The book, what my goal really with the book is to show the realities of a parent-child relationship, and no relationship is perfect, obviously. So I do include things like, some of the difficulties she had in coming to terms with my orientation. Although you think that she wouldn't have been super surprised, since when I was little, I used to climb the shelves in our living room over on 4th Section Road and then sit up there and pretend to be Endora from Bewitched. So you'd think she wouldn't have been quite surprised, but at any rate. Still, I wanted to portray all of that because I wanted to provide a realistic view of a relationship between a mother and child, which is complex, and it evolves over time, over decades and over years. And I think I tried to do the best I could to show us both as human beings, and also to portray her as the amazing character that she was, and that a lot of you know that she was. The other reason I was afraid for people in the general public to read the book was because I was afraid that people might be turned off by the sad elements of it. Because as you know, if you've read it, one of the main focuses is the last few months of her life. That's kind of the present setting of the book, is the last few months that she spent of her life when she was living, especially in New York City, near me, in a nursing home. And the thing is, I didn't even plan on writing a book. I started this out as something like therapy, because as we were going through these difficult times, just kind of like you keep a journal or a diary, it helped me to just write down everything that we were going through, everything my mother was going through, and I guess it helped me deal with it psychologically. But then, as I was writing about those sad things and difficult things, other things started bubbling up, happy things and funny things and all of that, and I wanted to capture that as well. And so that's really how gradually, slowly but surely, the book came together. And I didn't plan on publishing it, but I wanted it to be something that represented our whole lives together and not just focus on one element, whether it's happy or sad. And so once I started thinking, maybe I do have enough for a book, and it was published in a few essays were published in some small literary journals, I did what you're supposed to do if you really want to do a book. I took some writing classes, because in my case, I didn't feel like I was an expert at this kind of writing. And also I got feedback and did some rewriting, and then, very important, I stepped back for a few months, and I didn't look at it, I didn't think about it too much. I just needed to come back with fresh eyes and see what I really had. And so when I did come back, I said to myself, this book is a big downer. And I thought, even my mother might look at this and say, well, nobody's going to want to read a book about an old lady getting sick. But, so then I went back and I decided, let me add even more details, even more depth to the stories that are set in the past and the funny stuff. And so I included more details about the funny stories, and about like the time that I pooped in the woods near the President's Village Apartments to try to impress a group of older kids. And I don't know if that really worked or not. But anyway, and or when I still there. It may still be there, yeah. Be careful when you walk around the President's Village. And or the times later on in 7th grade when my 7th grade best friend JJ and I would play flight attendant on the abandoned school buses in the fields over near kind of Redmond Road, 4th Section Road area. I don't know who's responsible for putting the buses there, and I don't know if they're still there, but if so, let's go play. And or when we play Jeannie, my friend and I would play I Dream of Jeannie at Dottie Lashander's house over in Clarkson, because she had these really nice decorative bottles. So I added more details about stuff like that because I figured that would make people happy. You know, like people like to read about quirky childhoods and funny stuff and how weird a kid I was. And then I felt like I had a more balanced book, and I felt that in the long run, the book is funny and sad, just like life, because that's how life is. And what I've been hearing from a lot of readers is that including tonight, is that when you read it, you laugh and you cry. And I think that's wonderful, really, because that's, I think that's a natural reaction, and that's a reaction to life in general, because there's humor and there is pain in life. And so showing a little bit about our story, my mother's and my story, and how we dealt with all of this, I think was really good. Now, my surprise was when the book was published that people really, the parts that people seem to relate to the most are about the more difficult moments in our life, which is really emotional for me to find out, because it turns out that we all have more in common with each other than we might realize. And so to hear hear people's stories, I think is just wonderful. So, I've heard from people who could everyone relates to slightly different stories or different parts of the book. So I've heard from people who say, I felt like a misfit, or like I didn't fit in when I was a kid, or, I had trouble communicating with my parent when I was growing up, and I had trouble figuring out my place in the world. I've heard from people who had to care for their aging parents and deal with illness and the prospect of having to say goodbye to a loved one. I heard from one woman who was asking me, she was going through a similar thing with her aging parent, as she still is, and she contacted me asking, what do I think she could say to her father, who was in a nursing home, to help him feel better, because he was so emotionally, worked up and having a difficult time with his own situation. So she read the book and she was asking me what I thought I could say to him. And I heard from another woman who really related to the part in the book where I was afraid to identify Angel as my husband in front of a nurse's aide in the nursing home, because I was afraid if the nurse's aide was homophobic, that she might take it out on my mother when I wasn't around. And my mother at that point wouldn't have been able to even tell me if there'd been a problem. But in her case, in this woman's case, she was telling me about her father who was in a hospital, and she was afraid to mention the fact that they were Jewish because she wasn't sure if they might be anti-Semitic. So it really goes to show you that there are so many things that we have in common, even if it may not seem that we do in the first place. And also another thing, as you all know, if you read the book or any parts of it, there is a lot of funny stuff in here, and I think humor is such an important part of life as well, and it's important. It can be a really helpful way of dealing with difficult situations. And if you knew Eunice Chesnut, you know that humor was a big part of her personality, and so I hope that I got at least some of her sense of humor. And as an example, I would like to just read a quick piece of a chapter here that features Eunice Chesnut, of course, and it's set in the nursing home in New York City, where she moved to be closer to my sister and me in 2015. And this takes place in the fall, just before her birthday, and it includes a letter that was supposedly written to be sent to several of you, like you two and a few other people here, but you didn't receive it, and I'll tell you why as we read through this. Mountains of greeting cards, nearly all from Brockport, piled up in the weeks before my mother's 90th birthday. Glenn, Angel, and I would hold up each card that arrived and announce who'd sent it. "That's nice," my mother would respond, then look away as we read the contents, as if eavesdropping on the words of a random conversation between strangers in a bus station. I posted all the cards on the wall behind her bed, a public display that I created particularly so that the staff would see how many people loved my mother. She'd use the same reasoning when she used to send cards and letters to her own sister, Rayreen, some of you may know her as Irina, who had moved to a nursing home in California several years earlier. "She may not even understand or remember that she's gotten any mail," my mother had said, "but I want the staff to know that there are people there who care about her and are keeping an eye on her." So we were sitting there one day, and she said, "How old am I going to be?" She asked me as I was taping some cards to the wall. "You're going to be 90, Mama." She frowned. "90?
90? That can't be. That's old. A couple of days later, after reviewing an especially large number of cards, she turned to me as I sat on her bed. You know, it's nice that people think to write to me, she said, but I feel like that part of my life is over. I appreciated the effort of so many of her friends in Brockport to send greetings, and I felt bad that she wasn't able to write back to any of them because physically she couldn't write, and also mentally she was too confused to really, compose a letter by herself. But I had an idea. Would you like to dictate a letter to me and I can send it to all of your friends back home in Brockport? I asked. I don't know, she said, pausing as she moved one hand from the arm of the wheelchair to her cheek in a thinking pose. I guess that would be the nice thing to do, but I'm not sure what I would say. It's okay, we can work on this together, I said. I pulled out a pen and paper from my fake vintage Pan Am airline bag. What would you like to tell them? My mother looked blankly around the solarium where we were, as if she might find ideas nestled in the leaves of the tiny trees near the window. Well, I just don't know. Anything special you'd like to ask them? Her gaze circled back to me and a grin bubbled up. Yes, where the heck am I? I chuckled and began writing as my mother continued to dictate. Whenever she stopped, I interjected a few words or asked a few questions to keep her going. We continued riffing together, giggling and egging each other on just to be funny. Within a few minutes, we'd come up with a missive that had us both laughing out loud for the first time since her arrival in New York City. There had been only one other time since my mother started declining mentally and physically that we'd shared such a truly healthy laugh. Several months earlier, my mother had been staying in a rehab center near Brockport, actually in Spencerport, to recover from an earlier fall. I'm just so depressed, she had told me, and I flew up to spend a few days with her, visiting her in Spencerport, and I tried as much as I could to lighten her mood, but nothing made her smile. Until my husband, Angel, sent me the remedy. I had texted him about her inconsolable sadness and feeling of powerlessness. He responded with a text that contained 3 finely detailed, full-color illustrations, beautifully done, of 3 important world figures, Queen Elizabeth, the Pope, and President Barack Obama. What made these 3 illustrations special, however, was that each one of these revered individuals was sitting on a toilet. They were fully dressed from the waist up, but their legs were splayed and open as they did their business on the potty. So I showed the phone to my mother. She turned to the screen and she burst out laughing for the first time in weeks. Those visuals were exactly what she needed. She laughed hysterically and repeatedly asked to see those again. She smiled more for the rest of the day, and actually the rest of the week. So thank you, Angel, for that. And now here we were in New York City, creating our own form of humor. I later decided that the letter was too strange to actually send to any of her friends, so that's why none of you actually received this. But if you've read the book, you know it. I was afraid that you might not understand the context or might think that she'd lost her mind or that I was making fun of her since you weren't present to appreciate the collaborative silliness of this letter. But it was, for us, it was worth every minute of the time we spent putting it together. So I'm going to read to you this brief letter now that we had together written to send to some of you. I'm going to read it in her voice. She would like me to do that. Dear friends, the only sensible question I can ask is, where am I? I'm not sure of the answer, but maybe one of you can fill me in. I do remember you all as very, very good friends, and I was lucky to have you. Now, I suppose I'm lucky just to be alive. Maybe not so lucky, but we must play with the cards we are dealt. I will be 90 this fall. Glenn and Mark are very loyal to me, and I see them as often as possible. Venerable Hills is a nice facility with 2 people in each room, but I don't even remember who my roommate is. Wait, what did I just say? How will I remember to mail this letter? Letter? What letter? Life is so sad. Love you all and thinking of you. How many of you are there anyway? I'd love to see you, but I don't want you to see me. In closing, where's the bathroom? Love, Eunice. And that's the letter. So thank you again, and I know that a lot of you were touched and appreciated the sense of humor that my mother had for so many decades here, and so I'm so glad to see a lot of you back here and also see some new faces as well. And thank you so much for coming out to, and supporting the book and helping to keep my mother's spirit alive, because it's something that really means a lot to me. So thank you so much. If there's any questions, feel free to ask. Where's the bathroom? That is the perfect question. Anyone else? Well, if you're at the President's Village, I can tell you where I use the bathroom.
Mark, when did she leave Spencerport? Do you remember?
She was in Spencerport just for a few weeks.
Right.
I think it might have been a couple months or less. And she was at that facility, I can't remember the name, but it's like a historic, beautiful house that has
Right.
an addition to the back right downtown.
That's right.
And she was just there for a number of weeks. Yes, Wedgwood, yes, yes. Yes, so
Well, I
she,
just went over to visit her in Wedgwood.
you did, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Several times.
Yes.
Bring her something. And she did like potato chips. I remember that.
She did like, yes. Yeah, and in New York City also, she had her favorite kind of potato chips were in the green bag and I think Wise Ridgies,
I think
sour
so.
cream and onion. Yes. She was very opinionated about the potato chips. It's true. Yes. Anyone else? Cool. Well, I guess if that's it, did they cut the cake?
What's Glenn doing?
What's Glenn doing?
Yeah.
She's sitting back there and judging me because certain things in the book might not be correct. Glenn is my sister, and she is back there. She is also in the book because she obviously played a huge role. We were a team in, helping with the caregiving of my mother. So I guess we have cake, we have drinks, and some snacks and everything. So let's chat some more, and thank you so much for coming. This is the Interfaith Chapel at Frederick Douglass Greater Rochester International Airport, and this is where we had this idea. I had this idea that maybe we should get married because it's a really cool place right next to the baggage claim. It would have been perfect. It didn't quite work out. I explain why in the book. It's been a really successful visit, I would say, to the Greater Rochester area, and it's been emotional too because I've been able to reconnect with friends, family friends, my mother's friends, and neighbors, and also people I don't even know, I hadn't even met before, who've either read the book or are going to read the book because they relate to some of the topics and themes that the book presents. And it's been really, really cool and emotional too sometimes, because you think that you don't have things in common with some people, or you think that they wouldn't care about hearing your story, but it turns out that they do, and we do have so many things in common, a lot of people, even if it may not appear so at the beginning. So to hear from people, all different identities and age groups and ethnicities and races and sexual orientations, and to be able to relate on these personal matters, it's been really, really nice, and especially here in my hometown region. And being on TV, of course, was exciting too. But overall, it's been successful and so nice to hear from people about their shared experiences.